Ex-boyfriend wrecked my car out of spite. Said, what are you going to do about it? I reported it stolen, got him arrested, and sold his car to pay for mine. He's still paying off the court fees. I wasn't sure if I should post this, but I'm at the point where I feel like I need to get it all out. This happened a couple of years ago, but it still haunts me in some ways. Everyone involved has moved on, except maybe him, but the satisfaction I got from what I did still feels as fresh as the day it happened. If I'm a little long-winded, sorry. There's a lot to unpack here. Let me set the stage. My name is Arlena, and this story takes place in Bowling Green, Kentucky. I was 26 at the time, running a small graphic design business out of my apartment, scraping by but doing all right for myself. My ex-boyfriend, Grayson, was 29 and a walking, talking cautionary tale. We dated for about 2 years, and looking back, I don't know what I was thinking. Maybe I liked the idea of fixing him. Maybe I thought he'd change for me. Spoiler, he didn't. When we first met, Grayson seemed great. He was charming, made me laugh, and had this carefree attitude that I found really attractive. He drove an old beat-up Ford F-150 that he called Betsy and talked about her like she was a family heirloom. He had a rough-around-the-edges vibe that I guess I mistook for ambition. In reality, he was just lazy. After about 6 months, the cracks started showing. He never held down a job for long. He was always between opportunities or waiting for something better. Meanwhile, I was paying most of the bills. At first, it was small stuff, groceries here, a night out there. But over time, it became clear that Grayson was perfectly fine living off of me. Anytime I brought it up, he'd blow up at me, accusing me of not supporting him or not believing in his potential. I bought into it for way longer than I should have. By the time we hit the 2-year mark, I was drained, emotionally, financially, and mentally. Grayson was jealous, controlling, and immature. He'd check my phone, accuse me of cheating with clients, seriously, and pick fights over nothing. My friends hated him, my family hated him, and, honestly, I think deep down I hated him too. But I was afraid of the drama that would come with breaking up. I'd seen how petty he could get over small things, and I didn't want to know what he'd do if I actually left him. Turns out, I underestimated him. One night, after another fight about money, I finally snapped. He'd been sitting on the couch all day while I worked on a big project for a client, and when I asked him to at least make dinner, he told me I was too demanding and stormed out. That was it for me. When he came back 2 days later like nothing had happened, I told him we were done. No screaming, no fighting. Just, we're done. Get your stuff and go. At first, he didn't believe me. He laughed like I was joking. When he realized I was serious, the insults started. He called me selfish, ungrateful, a whole list of things I won't repeat. I just stood there, letting him get it out of his system. When he finally stormed out, slamming the door so hard it rattled the windows, I felt a huge sense of relief. I thought the worst was over. I couldn't have been more wrong. About a week later, I woke up early to head out for groceries. When I got to the parking lot, my stomach dropped. My car, a red 2016 Toyota Camry that I loved, was completely trashed. The windshield was smashed, the tires were slashed, and there were deep scratches down both sides. To top it all off, someone had spray-painted the word, slut, in huge black letters across the hood. I stood there in shock, my heart pounding. It didn't take a genius to figure out who was responsible. Grayson was the only person angry enough to do something like this. And the worst part? He still had a spare key to my car. I'd given it to him when we were dating because he'd lost his car key once. I'm sure now that was a lie. I knew he'd used it to get into the car and do this. I went back inside and called him. I was shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. When he picked up, I didn't even let him speak. What the hell is wrong with you, Grayson? You destroyed my car? He didn't even try to deny it. He laughed. Yeah, I did. You deserved it. Are you serious? Do you know how much this is going to cost me? Not my problem, he said. What are you going to do about it? Call the cops? Good luck proving anything. Then he hung up. I sat there staring at my phone, furious and helpless. He was right. I didn't have cameras outside my apartment, and without proof, the cops wouldn't do much. My insurance wouldn't cover vandalism unless I paid a huge deductible, and I couldn't afford that. I felt trapped. But then I realized something. I didn't need cameras or proof. I had his confession, his smug, arrogant voice admitting to everything. I'd always been the type to avoid confrontation, but at that moment, something in me snapped. If Grayson wanted to play games, I was going to beat him at his own game. First, I took screenshots of every text he'd ever sent me that could back up my case. I saved the texts where he admitted to wrecking my car. I even went through old messages for anything that showed his violent tendencies or unstable behavior. I put it all in a folder on my computer labeled Grayson Files. Next, I started thinking about how to hit him where it hurt. Grayson loved his truck. Betsy was his pride and joy. He didn't care about much, but that truck was his baby. I decided I was going to take her from him. The first step was reporting my car as stolen. I know it sounds extreme, but technically, Grayson still had a key, and I could argue that he took it without my permission. I went to the police, explained everything, and showed them the texts. They filed a report and said they'd start looking into it. I could tell from the way one of the officers rolled his eyes when I mentioned Grayson's name that this wasn't their first encounter with him. With the police involved, I moved on to the next part of my plan, putting a lien on Betsy. I'd heard from a friend who worked in a title office that it was possible to file a lien against someone's property under certain circumstances. It wasn't easy, but with some creative maneuvering, and a little help from my friend, I managed to get a claim on his truck. Now Betsy was tied up in legal red tape, and Grayson couldn't sell her or do anything with her until he dealt with me. I knew Grayson would find out eventually, and I couldn't wait to see his reaction. But for now, I waited. The police were investigating, my lien was in place, and I was ready for whatever came next. A few days after filing the police report, I got a call from an officer. They wanted to bring Grayson in for questioning. Apparently, they'd already checked with my neighbors, and one of them mentioned seeing him around the night my car was vandalized. Combined with the texts I'd shown them, it was enough to make him a person of interest. They said they'd handle it from there, and I should sit tight. I wasn't about to just sit tight. The lien on Betsy was still hanging over Grayson's head like a storm cloud. I hadn't heard from him since our last fight, but I knew it was only a matter of time before he figured out what I'd done. Sure enough, a week later, he showed up at my apartment. He banged on my door like a madman, yelling my name loud enough that the whole block could hear. I debated calling the cops right then and there, but I decided to answer. I wanted to see him squirm. When I opened the door, Grayson looked terrible, bloodshot eyes, messy hair, and an expression like he'd just swallowed a lemon. He didn't waste any time. "You stole my truck," he shouted. "What the hell, Arlena? You can't just take Betsy. She's mine." I crossed my arms and leaned against the doorframe. "Oh, like how you took my car without my permission? Funny how that works, isn't it?" He froze for a second, like he hadn't expected me to fight back. Then he launched into a tirade about how I was ruining his life, how I was a vindictive psycho, and how I had no right to mess with his property. I let him rant until he finally ran out of steam. "Are you done?" I asked. He glared at me but didn't say anything. "Good. Let me explain something to you, Grayson. You trashed my car. You admitted it. I gave the cops everything they need to charge you, and now you're facing vandalism and theft charges. Oh, and by the way, that lien on Betsy? Totally legal. She's mine now." His jaw dropped. I could almost see the gears turning in his head as he tried to figure out how to get out of this. Finally, he resorted to begging. He actually dropped to his knees on my front porch, hands clasped together like a child pleading for candy. "Please, Arlena," he said. "You can't do this. Betsy's all I have. I'll fix your car, I swear. I'll pay you back. Just please don't take her." I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. Seeing him grovel was satisfying in a way I can't even describe, but I wasn't about to let him off the hook. "It's too late for that," I said. "You had your chance to make this right, and you chose to be an asshole instead. Enjoy the consequences." I shut the door in his face and locked it. He kept yelling for a while, but eventually, he left. I watched through the peephole as he stomped back to his mom's car. Of course he'd borrowed her car since Betsy was legally tied up, and sped off. A few days later, the cops arrested him. He was charged with vandalism, theft, and a few other things I don't remember. I didn't have to do much. The evidence I'd given them was enough to make their case. He tried to weasel his way out of it, but he didn't stand a chance. He ended up taking a plea deal that included community service, fines, and court fees. He also had to pay me restitution for the damage to my car. But here's the best part, while all this was happening, I sold Betsy. Yup, I sold her. Thanks to the lien, I was able to take legal ownership of the truck, and I found a buyer who was willing to pay cash. I got $5,000 for her, which was just enough to cover the cost of fixing my Camry. It felt poetic, in a way, using the thing he loved most to undo the damage he'd done to me. When Grayson found out, he lost his mind. He called me, screaming and threatening to sue, but there was nothing he could do. Everything I'd done was perfectly legal. I blocked his number after that and haven't spoken to him since. As far as I know, Grayson is still paying off his court fees. Last I heard, he was working part-time at a gas station and couch surfing with friends because he couldn't afford his own place. Meanwhile, I moved on with my life. I eventually traded in my Camry for a newer car, and I've been in a healthy, happy relationship for over a year now. Looking back, I have no regrets. Grayson thought he could walk all over me, but I proved him wrong. If he'd just left me alone after the breakup, none of this would have happened. But he made his bed, and now he's lying in it. To anyone out there dealing with a toxic ex, don't let them intimidate you. Stand up for yourself, and don't be afraid to hit back when they come for you. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply refusing to be their victim. And in my case, a little paperwork didn't hurt either.